Penn Hills, Pennsylvania, August 31st, 2019. I'm not sure if at the time you were following this story when it happened in 2019, but if you hadn't, I'd like to tell you about it and how I felt. It had to be an accident. That's what I said. I'm sure when the driver turns around and realizes that the passenger has left their sleeping baby in the car, the baby will be safely returned to her father. But it wasn't going to be that simple. The driver sped away like it was an abduction. Why would a driver want to take off with this man's child? Horror stories by Uber, Lyft drivers. Was this going to be one? But this one was a little bit different. The driver was a woman. How could she just speed off that quickly? How did the child even get left in the car in the first place? Those were the things running through my mind. And to learn that there was another man in the car, a friend of the father, it was just confusing. But when you aren't telling the complete truth, things do tend to feel and sound confusing. An Amber Alert was issued. Nalani Johnson, 2 years old, black female with black hair, brown eyes. Nalani was wearing a black skirt with floral designs and black sandals. She goes by the nickname Moo. There was even information on the car seat for anyone to look out for her and information on her abductor. She, Nalani, is the cutest thing, and I'm just hoping that this child is found safely and soon. Sharena Islam Nancy, 25 years old, an Indian American woman with black hair, brown eyes, is on the run with Nalani. Maybe she's damaged, a woman who has lost a child and desperately wants one. That's what some were saying, but not me. But I have to tell you, I was clueless as to what was really going on here. The rideshare abductor, she was on CCTV footage during this manhunt. She was at a grocery store. Her car was finally spotted by authorities around 7:30 p.m., 2.5 hours later. The rideshare abductor was actually on the phone when she was pulled over and arrested. Nalani, nor her car seat, was even in Nancy's car. You could hear on the police body cam Nancy saying she didn't know where Nalani was. Her car was impounded. The gorgeous little girl still was missing. So let's get back to Saturday, August 31st, 2019 at 5 p.m., the day she was taken. We would find out later that the female driver was actually working for a rideshare company, but not that day. She was driving the father, Paul Johnson, and his friend, who WPXI News says is actually Nalani's uncle, and I'll just go by his first name, Justin. So this sweet, precious little girl, Nalani, she was in the back seat, strapped in. And Nancy was just riding around on her own time. Nancy would tell police that the father, Johnson, had sold Naomi for $10,000 and asked her to drive the child to a location where a woman would meet her and take Nalani. She said the woman was in a silver SUV with out-of-state plates. I can't remember if she said the race of the women or not. Though there wasn't any evidence to support Nancy's claims, the police still could not rule that out. The FBI was also on this case at the time. I mean, it just sounded strange. I thought to myself, if the dad was going to sell his daughter, why would he need a ride share to drive her somewhere and drop her off? I mean, to help him out with this crime. I mean, was she getting a cut of the money? Why would he even go into detail with telling a driver, this is my daughter, and she's worth $10,000 and I'm selling her? I mean, at least that's what I thought. But more of this nightmare was about to unfold. So Paul Johnson and Nancy had met each other over social media during this time. They had been talking for several months. The two had actually been in a romantic relationship. Now, it was really starting to make more sense, but still, not about Nalani missing. That still made no sense. Around 5 p.m. on that evening, Nancy and Johnson had gotten into a very heated argument. Some sources said it was over money. The two occupants in the car had stepped out while the father was trying to retrieve his daughter, and Nancy had quickly sped away. Paul tried calling Nancy. She either didn't pick up or it wasn't clearly explained to the public of what was being said on those phone calls. While in jail, we had learned all about Nancy. She was married to a 22-year-old Rahan Uden. He said he was speaking to her on video phone and that he could see everything that was in the car. There was never any child in the car in the back seat, nor did she ever mention that she had even picked up a child that day. Uden was actually on the phone with his wife when she was suddenly pulled over by the police. He said all he heard her say was, quote, "They have a gun on me," end quote. Uden was definitely in the dark, and he hadn't a clue of what his wife had been up to. He said that they had lived in Monroeville. He had got deported back to India, where he was currently at. He explained that Nancy had the rideshare job and that she would send him money to help him take care of their young daughter. So, she has a kid too. So the fact that she was longing for a child, that theory just went out the window. Uden was able to speak to Nancy while she was incarcerated. She told him that she didn't take Nalani. Now this was going into the second day of Nalani missing. Uden said, quote, "I don't know if she did or didn't. One part of me believes that she can, and another part is like, nothing's been found. You can't make conclusions." Unquote. The fact that her husband thought that she could snatch someone's kid was very concerning. Where was Nalani's mother in all of this? She was actually being bullied by people on social media, but that's nothing new. These things happen all the time. When there's a tragedy, strangers either rally or they go against, whatever the circumstances is. Gladys Durante, she filed a PFA, protection from abuse, on her child's father, Paul Johnson. On April 15, 2019, she alleges that Paul threatened to harm her and allegedly tried to kill Nalani. It's unclear, as far as what I read, of how Nalani was almost killed. But those court papers had a list of things on it. He tampered with her car, almost causing an accident. I believe that they were all driving when this happened. He ripped pictures off her wall, took everything out of her refrigerator, and stole her shoes and her Xbox. Paul had held a gun to his own head, threatening to kill himself while Nalani was in the car. He threatened to kill Gladys and anyone she was with. He pulled a gun on the mother's sister. Then there was a lot of destruction going on in this paperwork, which leads me to believe that there was some type of domestic abuse occurring. But on April 30th, 2 weeks later, Durante failed to show up to the court date, so that temporary PFA, protection for abuse, it expired. Did they make up? I mean, who knows? This happens a lot. I remember seeing the paternal grandfather and grandmother on the news discussing Nalani's disappearance. I didn't see the father too much on the news. Then again, I hadn't seen every news broadcast about Nalani. When I did, he appeared shy, but in this circumstance, guilty. Far more than shy. Yes, guilty. Guilty of his actions. He was the reason why him and whoever that cared for Nalani was going through this. Someone had access to Nalani that shouldn't have. And it was her. Granted, of course, he didn't know that this woman was capable of this. Unfortunately, he had to find out the hard way that can't trust everybody around your children. That Monday, September 2nd, Nancy would be charged with kidnapping a child, interference with custody of a child, and the whereabouts of a child. She was very uncooperative. She remained silent on where Nalani was. She would just pretty much say that Paul Johnson got $10,000 for the sale of his child. Search teams were formed. Paul had actually addressed the public to help locate his daughter. Nancy's phone records were looked at, the small towns that she had driven through shortly after Nalani was abducted. They recorded all the locations, and they would be searched. A public vigil was held for the missing girl on Tuesday, September 3rd at 3:30 p.m. Searchers using cadaver dogs, drones, helicopters, everything that they could find. In the area of Pine Ridge Park in the Borough Township of Indiana County, Nalani's remains were found. She was still strapped in her car seat wearing the same clothing that she had disappeared in. Strangers like myself that had followed this story were in disbelief. I mean, why? Did this woman actually just leave this baby in the park? Strangers had even made a makeshift memorial with flowers for the little girl. It was said that she probably died of dehydration, but an autopsy would have to be performed, and it was. Nalani's death was ruled homicidal violence, unknown, and abuse of a corpse. There were no signs of battery, but a yellowish content was in her stomach, which was unknown. And this was conducted by the Indiana County coroner. Nalani was actually dead before she was even placed in that park alone. So whatever happened to her, it had happened in Nancy's rideshare car. Why didn't Nancy just turn back to Paul and give him his child back? I mean, how much money, if it is about money, did he really owe her? And was killing his daughter, was that going to even out the amount? I mean, this is so sickening. It's evil. And to find out that she has a young daughter too? Almost 3 years later, the trial had finally started, and Nancy was given the opportunity to speak, and she declines. Nalani's family cried as they heard the rideshare murderer's fate. With 2.5 years credit, Sharena Islam Nancy received 15 to 30 years. So if she does 15 years, when she gets out, she'll be 43 years old. And that's not an old woman. Her daughter will be younger than she was when she committed this senseless, evil crime. Hopefully every time she's up for parole, the entire family will show up with reasons of why she shouldn't be free. And if they couldn't show up, and I know they will, let me know. I'll find a way to get down there and say the reasons why Sharena Islam Nancy should not be free. Family members responded, she should have gotten life. Paul said, quote, "There's no price to put on Nalani. I'm at a loss for words," end quote. Nalani's mother, who Publicly on her Facebook page, it mentioned that she was very suicidal and went into a deep depression after her daughter's death. She speaks candidly in her own words on her own page about how she felt. There's a beautiful picture, video collection that was done from a friend or a family member of Nalani. I put the link in the description box. It's so pretty. The mother said this, quote, "She was my little person. She lit up my world and gave my purpose. I will never get to see her grow up, graduate, and have kids. I will forever have a hole in my heart." End quote. Keep resting, Nalani.